We left off last video with the ability to get an image from our user's camera roll. Before we continue on with the profile, let's address our UI a little bit and implement some basic text validation and keyboard dismissal stuff. Now for our basic validation, all we're gonna do is make sure every field has something in it, make sure there's an avatar image, and then make sure our bio is less than 100 characters. If any of those fail, we're gonna pop up a pretty generic error letting the user know, what's up. Now this is another one of those cases where I had to draw the line somewhere, form validation, text validation. That's a rabbit hole that you can go pretty deep down. And we'll talk about some examples. And by all means, there's gonna be over 1,000 people that take this course. Leave how you handle this kind of stuff in the comments because there's many different ways to do it. So I think the comment section could turn into something valuable. But let's talk about some examples of what you could do. The most common one is limiting what type of characters can be in a field. For example, our first name, you can make that just letters only, right? No numbers, no special characters. You can use regular expressions to limit that. But then maybe in the company name, you do want to allow numbers. Or like I said, maybe you do want to allow emojis in the name for some character. And then another thing we're not really checking for is there's nothing stopping our user from copying and pasting an entire book into their first name field. Right? So maybe you want to limit the character count. And the idea here is think of all the crazy ways you can break your form. Because when you are building a production app at any kind of scale, you got to handle this kind of stuff. And then you got to ask yourself, do you want to give the user a very specific error to let them know exactly what they messed up, right? If you look at our error message, we're just basically giving our rules and it's kind of up to them to figure it out. And admittedly, that's probably not the best UX, but again, you got to draw the line somewhere. I didn't want to go down this rabbit hole of handling all these different edge cases and then showing a different error for each one of the cases. Again, that is what you should do in a real production app. And I didn't want this course to be 1,000 videos long, but I at least wanted to talk about the stuff you should be thinking about when you're validating your form. And a good place to start, if you're not familiar with them, is looking into regular expressions. That's how you can limit what type of characters go into a field. So back in Xcode on our profile view, you see here, this is where we left off with our photo picker. Again, we are going to refactor the profile view soon, but for now, let's create a function on here called isValidProfile, because we're going to look at the profile, see if it's valid. If it's true, we're going to let them proceed and create one. If it's false, we're going to pop up our error. So this does return a bool. And you see we need a return function. So we will return true for now, because up above this, we're going to run all of our checks, right? And then if these checks come back true, we're going to return false. And then if all the checks pass, it will hit this return true. So it's really just one big guard statement. So guard first name dot is empty, except we want to make sure it's not empty, right? So we put the bang operator in front of it. And then we're just going to comma separate pretty much down our form here. So we'll do not last name dot is empty, and then not company name dot is empty, comma, and then not bio dot is empty, comma, and then now we are to our avatar image where we want to make sure it is not equal to the placeholder image, right? Because if I go back to the top, we did give it a default value of our placeholder image avatar. And the reason we're making this required, because I know a lot of apps don't make profile pictures required. The reason I thought was just for the product, right? If you look at these screenshots, if you look at the grid and the location detail, or even in the list of locations that show the little profile image, if we just had nothing but placeholder avatars, I don't know. I think that kind of hurts the app. That is a product decision. I'm sure there's a good argument for not doing that, but in our educational app case, we are going to make it required. So we'll do avatar not equal to placeholder image dot avatar. And then the last one, bio dot count is less than 100. And then here we want to do else return false, right? So we're going to check all of these. If any one of these evaluates to true, right? If first name is empty is true, we're automatically returning false, right? Because it's not valid. So it's going to check each one individually. If any of them equate to false, we're done because we're making every field required. If all of that passes, go ahead and return true. All right, so that's our check. But before we test this, let's update our UI with a way to dismiss the keyboard. Because look, if we test this right now, and we'll go to our profile view, we won't have a way to dismiss the keyboard. Okay, here we go. So if I go into first name, by the way, if your keyboard doesn't show up, hit Command K. That will pop it up. And then I'll start typing. And you look, there's no way to dismiss the keyboard. Well, here you can hit return. But if you'll notice, once we go into our bio and we start hitting return, okay, now there's no way to dismiss it. And now we're all like messed up here. So we'll go back up here and then hit return. So there's a little hacky way to do it. But the reason I'm going to use a keyboard button here, because I initially experimented with, trying to find a place for them to just tap. But if you notice, like all of our elements are interactable, right? If they tap here, that's the bio. If they tap here, that's the photo picker. And if they tap here, like that's the company name. And even out here, right, that is still technically the name thing. So if you know in SwiftUI, there's no like clean way to just have this blank empty space tappable, because if you put a tap gesture on the overall VStack, it only goes on the elements in the VStack, not like the empty like space around it. So if we did put it on the VStack, you could tap this little section right here with bio characters remain, and that would dismiss it. The point is, with no keyboard dismiss button, it was really tricky and not very user friendly. So that's why I decided to go with the keyboard dismiss button. It was kind of a last resort. So let's go ahead and implement that. We'll stop it. The first thing we need to do is implement the function that actually dismisses the keyboard. So we're going to go to our extensions here. So utilities, extensions, go to our view extension, right? This is our extension on our SwiftUI view. We'll create another function, dismiss keyboard. And here we go into UI application.shared.send action. And then we do hashtag selector. Here, see, we're getting into like some UIKit Objective-C type stuff. Again, hopefully soon, SwiftUI has some native way to deal with the keyboard, hopefully in a couple weeks at this year's WWDC. If not, I imagine we'll get it, in the years to come. But right now, you got to do this kind of stuff. So here, the selector is UI responder. .resign first responder. If anybody's coming from UIKit and dealing with text fields, you have probably dealt with this before with resign first responder, become first responder, and then the rest is just nil, nil, nil. And basically this just dismisses the keyboard whenever we call this function, right? It resigns first responder, keyboard gone. So back to our profile view. Now we need to create our toolbar, which holds this button. So we'll do that under our navigation title, because I kind of conceptually put the navigation title and the toolbar together. So we'll do .toolbar, and then it has content, which we'll hit return there. And then like I always do, I kind of wish they did this by default, right? Get rid of the content parameter and just have the view builder there. So here in the toolbar, we're just going to put a button. Again, multiple trailing closures here. So the button action is going to be the dismiss keyboard function we just wrote. And then the label is going to be an image with the system name, because we're just going to use the SF symbol. We'll look it up here, but there is one for the keyboard. So we'll go to SF symbols, type in keyboard, and then you see right here, keyboard, chevron, compact, right? We're basically indicating, hey, dismiss the keyboard here. So copy name, back to Xcode, paste it in there. And let's bring up our preview here. I believe it'll show up there. Been working without it. And you can see our keyboard dismiss button is showing up blue in the preview. Even when we run the preview, it's still blue, but let's check it on the simulator. Sometimes this doesn't always match up. Sometimes it does. So I always test on the simulator when something doesn't quite look right in the preview, just to be sure. And yeah, it is showing up fine in the simulator. One thing I do notice we can touch up before is our create profile button is hugging our tab bar down here, as you can see. So something I missed when we did the UI, of course. But first, let's test our keyboard dismiss button before we move on to that. I got distracted. So let's say, Sean, whatever. It's not Sean. Hit the keyboard dismiss button. There you go. Selling autocorrect, huh? So you see our keyboard dismiss button is working. And again, I struggled with this. It's not the best UI, but like I said, the nature of the screen, there aren't any like non-interactable areas for them to like tap on. And of course, when you're in a name field, return works, but in the bio, you can't rely on the return key. So again, I capitulated and went with the keyboard dismiss button. Okay, so now that our keyboard is dismissing, now we're almost ready to test this. The last thing we need to set up is to show that alert for when this is false. So also what we're gonna have here, we're gonna have a function called create profile. And for now, we're just gonna check guard is valid profile, else show alert, and then return. And then if it passes that is valid profile, here's where we will go ahead and create our profile, send it up to CloudKit, coming soon. But right now, we just want to test our validation. So we got to create that alert. The first thing we need on this screen is, of course, our alert item at state private var alert item, and that is of type alert item. It's an optional. And then now we need to add the alert modifier. And like I mentioned, let's go to the location map view. How I mentioned this was pretty reusable, and I have it on pretty much every screen. Let's copy this alert from the location map view. So let's reuse that on our profile view here. We'll put it after the toolbar before the sheet. There you go. There's our alert item. I guess we don't have a view model yet. We will. So we'll just have to type view model again in later. So now the last thing we need for our alert is a new alert context that shows the proper error. So go to utilities, alert item. Here's our alert context. Again, we'll just copy this first one with our mark because we're going to need a new mark for our profile view. Again, that's how I separate all these. So instead of map view, I say profile view errors. And then this will be called invalid profile. We'll tab over our equal sign and then just start, changing your error. Invalid profile. And like I said, this is the generic one where I just kind of list all the stuff that's required. You've actually probably seen these in real products where they just say they aren't specific about what you did wrong. They just tell you all the rules. That's kind of what we're going with. Again, don't want to go down the rabbit hole. So we want to say all fields are required as well as a profile photo. Your bio must be less than 100 characters. And then do the /n for a new line. Please try again. Just a generic error message letting them know all of our rules. Hey, all the fields are required. You need a profile photo and your bio is less than 100 characters. Like I said, you could have 10 different error messages for all the different cases if you really wanted to be thorough. But again, for the sake of the course, we're doing this. Okay, back to the profile view. Let's call this here in create profile. Basically, if isValidProfile is false, here's where we want to do alert item equals alert context dot invalid profile. Okay, so now we can run it on the simulator and test this. All right, go to our profile. Let's go to let's just hit create profile, which by the way is hugging our tab bar. Before we move on, I'll forget if I don't. So let's go back to our profile view. Let's make you smaller. I don't need any of that. And on our button of create profile, let's just add some dot padding to the bottom. This is something I must have forgotten to do when we built the UI. I must not have noticed it. Okay, so now we'll run it. Our create profile button should be off the bottom of our tab bar. Go to the profile view. Yep, okay, there's that little padding here. Hit create profile, nothing happens. It's early in the morning, folks. Look at the time, 8:30. Okay, so I forgot to call the function, right? Here in our button, DDG button, we'll do create profile. There you go. Again, this is how development really goes. Silly, silly little mistakes that I don't edit out because I want to show how it really is. All right, run it again. Profile, cool. Now we hit create profile. Invalid profile, it shows, basically our message, right? All fields are required, as well as a profile photo. Your bio must be less than 100 characters. Please try again. Okay, cool. Now let's test it out with just, here's my first name, last name, and, sample bio. Cool. Well, we don't have a company name and we don't have a profile photo, so our check is still working. So let's give it a company name, whatever. Give it a profile photo. Go with the old grub, hit choose. Okay, so we have everything. First name, last name. I guess that's a company name. Profile photo, bio, create profile. We should see nothing happen. Okay, cool. Our error didn't pop up. This is where we would go ahead, create the profile, send it up to CloudKit, which is all going to happen in a future video. So now we have basic validation done. And like I said, that can be a pretty deep rabbit hole to go down. We can dismiss our keyboard pretty easily. Now we need to work on creating our profile. But there's one more thing we got to do, because in our image picker, this grub, we have an image. Well, we need to convert that image to a CK asset that we can attach to our record. Because up in CloudKit, we don't hold images, we hold CK assets. So in the next video, we're gonna work on our UI image to CK asset conversion.